All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. And for our panel today, first panel of the day, actually, Creative Frontiers, Navigating the Artistic Landscape in the Age of AI. So a lot of great content here. And I will introduce our moderator for today's panel. Her name is Erin Reilly. She is the professor and founding director of the Texas Immersive Institute at UT. So I will let Erin take over.
Thanks so much. Well, welcome everyone to our panel discussion. This is Creative Frontiers, Navigating the Artistic Landscape in the Age of AI. I feel like we've been talking about it for the past couple of days, so you're very familiar with it. We're joined today by an exceptional group of innovators here who are at the forefront of integrating artificial intelligence. We're going to talk specifically about generative AI into the creative process. So our panelists here have a wealth of experience. They're from various fields, from visual to auditory content, virtual world building, spatial storytelling. So just to kind of give you the lay of the land of how we're going to work today, we're going to explore the transformative impact of AI and creativity. We're going to delve into the way these tools are revolutionizing our workflows, enhancing our artistic expression, reshaping the creative economy, and then we're going to tackle some of the ethical considerations and future directions of how this landscape is rapidly evolving. So let's begin by understanding how each of our panelists are leveraging AI in their unique expertise. So I want you guys to introduce yourselves and then tell us how AI has transformed your approach to creativity. Julian, you want to start us off?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I am Julian Reyes of Keyframe Entertainment. My project is the Virtual Worlds Museum. And what we're doing is magnetizing all of the knowledge so we can show the world that virtual worlds are not as fragmented as they seem. You know, if you ask anybody what's a virtual world, everybody will have a different answer. And what we're doing is creating a way so it can be seen as an ecosystem. If you were to multiply all of the people in all of the virtual worlds, they're in the hundreds of millions, but they're all fragmented, and that's what the project is. Would you like me to talk about the AI part of it?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So how we leverage AI, I would say in 3 ways. First is the prototyping for creating virtual worlds, for creating the actual museum. We do a lot of the prototyping in Midjourney and other generative AI programs, but then we also take it into Cadum, which is a 3D software that gets 2D images and creates 3D models. And they just right now raised like $15 million. They're really ahead of the game as far as being able to turn 2D images into 3D images. Then the second part from there is creating 3D environments with generative AI with different tools. There's Meshy and there's Spline, and there's other ones that we use to experiment with. And then lastly is we're working on an AI agent, a docent for the museum. So when you are an avatar and you're exploring virtual worlds, you can ask questions and be able to have conversations, and it'll be trained on all the information from the virtual worlds.
Great. And Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Rachel Joy Victor. It's really good to be here. My background educationally is in computational neuroscience and spatial economics, but my work has really been focused on interactive storytelling, immersive storytelling, what is the narrative design of that, what does world building look like, and then also what is the strategy behind that, right? Like how do we build new business models around all of this? I think coming out of all of that work in the last couple years, there's been this convergence happening with how we produce content and how we think about making interactive and immersive experiences also intersects with how we think about virtual production and production in general becoming very computational. All of these things are leading to a more data-based way of seeing how we create content, and that means that where we're at with AI is also intersecting with that in a really interesting way. So after focusing a lot on the narrative world building side of things in the last couple years, I co-founded Fabric AI. We're really focused on the tooling side of we know how to make these experiences. How do we now leverage where AI is at across all of its different formats and implementations to really streamline the process of creation, come alongside creators, help augment their process?
Eva.
Hi, I'm Eva Heyning. I have been a creator, producer, artist for over 40 years as a creative technologist. I began teaching generative methods 3 years ago and experimenting with other artists. And I studied AI for graduate school in 2012 at Singularity University. So thinking through how AI fits into media workflows and into the creative process has been a part of my concept development work. I serve as a strategic production assistant, basically figuring out those workflows with teams, helping with concept design, and then specifically on projects like the Virtual Worlds Museum, helping to bring together the curatorial focus so that we can use our tools effectively in service of our creative vision instead of allowing the tools to shift that in some way.
Great. And Craig, wrap it up.
Sure. Craig Allen with Snack Shop. And my background mainly is in video games. I started in the 90s at the Walt Disney Studios, adapting things from feature animation, working with teams to do stuff for Sega, PlayStation, Xbox. Had my own development studio where we did the first Call of Duty game, among other things. And so for me, AI has always been part of our process. You know, you don't have a game without some sort of player controls that need to interact with the world. So it's great to have everybody here at the party now. Because AI now, I think, is really going to be like electricity. It's not a category, it's just something that enables everything. And from my perspective, what I love about AI, and we'll get into it a little bit later, is that it can accelerate the process from imagination to creation. And there's so much that gets wasted when you're in the development process with a team to just explore the space and try to figure out what is it that you want to make, and the speed to be able to go from idea generation to team coordination to actually putting the money and the resources into what's going to have impact, the signal to noise ratio is going to shift dramatically, and I get really excited about that.
Great, great. And you might be wondering why I'm moderating this. So I definitely have some interest in generative AI. Excuse my voice, y'all. I think I went to too many parties last night, and I hope you all did too.
It's like a gamer thing. You got to collect the whole
Exactly. So if we're not having fun at all, what's the point, right? So a little bit of background on me. When I started getting interested in AI was when I was being sponsored by IBM for some of my fan motivation work, and we were training a lot of models in regards to understanding why fans are motivated and like creating these new frameworks. I started realizing that I was scraping so much data, how much we were taking from people, and it made me a little nervous. So that was kind of the pinpoint of starting to think about the ethics of AI. Currently, I am running a creativity and AI class where my students are designing fictions, doing design fictions, using all these generative AI tools. They gave me 2 weeks to plan the class because the president of the university decided that this was the year of AI and what would Erin do to make this work. It's been quite fun bringing in a lot of artists into the classroom to really think through what tools are working and how it is. So that's what we're going to unpack. So I want to give each of these amazing artists a chance to kind of shine and share some of their work. Let's start with Eva.
All right. I think we're going to start a video and play a little 1-minute game with you to start. So if we roll the salted caramel game.
Why is the slides not changing? Oh, maybe.
I teach generative video. I also teach generative methods as a whole. So this video in particular, which is very glitchy and not actually playing, all right, fair. As many of these clips are going to do today, they're going to fail. This is a generative video on YouTube, so you can go check it out on your own, but this is part of our summer camp series. What I'm doing in this video particularly is helping people identify what is a generative clip, what is a hybrid clip, and what is a real clip. So the song you're hearing behind us is a song that I wrote the lyrics to and then made on Suno. And then the game itself is something that we use in media literacy to begin training artists to detect, number one, how is a clip made? And then number two, would you use the same method to create that clip, or would you use something completely different in your art? Okay, we're gonna play the second video. And this video is a comparison test. So the second video I'm gonna play compares Luma Dream Machine and Morph Studio. So the Luma Morph test, again, I build these clips in part to help train other artists how to do this work, but I'm also doing experimentation in real time. I produce music videos, I have a band, and I have music collaborators that I like to work with. So this, for me, was an early test on whether I would want to use Luma Dream Machine in future music videos. As you can see here, I'm taking images that started from my art. I took them into Midjourney, I played with them, I made some hybrids, and I was trying to do something complex. I was trying to break the AI, right? I'm trying to see where it fails. Because in an experimentation process, we're often trying to get to the edge of what a tool can do and then push it past its boundaries, right? That's what artists do. We experiment and we push the boundaries of these things. So I want my students, the other creators, the other artists, to be able to have the same capabilities, the facility to take these raw materials. What we're getting out of these generative tools is frequently like prima material, raw material to then edit and work with. It is not a finished product. What you get out of prompt craft, once you write a great prompt, is a great raw clip. But what you do with it to create the world is your artistic process. That is your creativity. And so I take people into that hybrid approach so that they understand how to bring these things together for their own workflows. So that's what I do at Reality Craft, and we have a summer camp cohort if that's something that's interesting to you.
So a quick follow-up question. Besides, you mentioned Suno. What are some of the other tools? Because I found that you have to use a lot of different tools to make this work. And you're taking it into kind of probably traditional media forms that you've already always used in your creative process. What name a few that you've worked in even just this video?
Right, so I'll often start with my own photos plus Midjourney. Midjourney for me allows me to do sometimes thousands of images in an iterative collection so that I'm not bound by trying to do only 25 images or something small. I try and make a very large set, and then I curate, and then I pick my favorite images, and then I will often run them through 2 or 3 different video generators with the same prompt and the same motion to be able to compare them effectively. So at the end of this video, for example, I lay side by side the shots and you can see exactly what you're getting one for the other. I then use Udio or Suno on the music because that allows me to put that on YouTube and not have to license original music. I can use my own lyrics and put something on it quickly.
Great.
So these take a day to make, roughly.
A day. Oh, wow, my students have a long way to go.
Yeah, and then Topaz AI at the end. Yeah.
Great. So, Julian, let me jump to you. How have recent advances in generative AI advanced the process of world building, especially talking about the virtual virtual museum that you've created?
Yeah, thank you so much. So what's really interesting is, as I mentioned earlier, the prototyping, right? So we can prompt the type of world that we want as far as the lighting, the look and feel, the perspective, and so forth. And then instead of trying to take it into a game engine, what we do is we go to Horizon Worlds by Meta, and then we create a quick prompt, like a quick sketch of what that world looks like. Then we can, and me as a producer, I just kind of mock it all up, and we have our 3D developer come in, and then he can walk around the space and see what we've done in Horizon as a sample. Then we can take a screenshot, take it back into a generative AI program, and then come up with another image that then we can take into Blender and then create a virtual world. And also from a music perspective, because I also love using Suno, my experiments are...
We're all obsessed
Yeah,
with
we are. So I
have
created this song called the AI Blues, and it talks about how AI took the person's tech job, and it took its robot dog, and it took its Tesla truck, and it's like this whole blues song. And then what I did, though, I did the lyrics with the help of ChatGPT, right? Then I went up with Suno, and then I got the lyrics, from the blues lyrics from there. But then I got the image from Midjourney, and I took that image into Kyber, right, which is an animation, generative animation, and I was able to marry the lyrical part of it with the visual part of it, and then create one video utilizing all those tools. And that creative AI tech stack is really what I'm interested in exploring more.
And how long did it take you to make something like that?
2 hours.
2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Quick creations. These are amazing. Craig, what's the vision? Tell me. Snack Shop is new, so tell us a little bit about the vision behind it and how you aim to revolutionize spatial storytelling.
Can we have the next slide?
Next slide. if I can get it. I don't think this is working for me. There we go. There we go.
Here we are. So Snack Shop is basically what we want to do is bring stories to life. Before doing Snack Shop, I was working at a company called Embodied, where we were using AI, machine learning, to create co-presence with this little robot called Moxie. It comes from this global robotics laboratory,
so cute.
and it shows up to teach kids how to be kind of a good friend by asking questions that the robots want to know, like what do humans do to make a friend, and what are life skills beyond academics that they can apply. And it was a wonderful project because you weren't trying to replace therapists or replace parents. It's really about augmenting, and much like a game does, creating a safe space for kids to explore identity and personality and ways of coping or conflict resolution. And what you see when you do a robot project is how different it is when you have something, whether it's virtual or physical, in the world that operates with autonomy. And this, I think, is one of the big shifts that we're going to go through with AI, is that media is not just going to be something we watch passively or even interact with in a game context where it's very directed by the player. We're going to start having a relationship with media. And as an example of what this feels like with Moxie, when you walk into the room, it might turn and say, "How are you feeling today?" Because it can recognize that you've entered the room and it wants to engage you, as opposed to if you have a laptop and you open the screen and you just go and you start typing. So this idea that I can be doing something and be interrupted by the world that is around me, a world that comes to life, this is where we're going. And the other thing I found out about working with Moxie is I always wanted to make a robot project, and I learned why hardware's hard. Because you can have a robot that needs 1,000 parts, you have 999 parts, and you don't have a robot. So I said, let's maybe go back to virtual, because that actually doesn't have so much inventory supply chain issues. So that's what Snack Shop is really about. We're still kind of in pseudo stealth, but we have a wonderful team of creators. And what we're really looking to do is use AI both to accelerate the ability for artists to have impact, to be able to do new things with these kind of characters that come to life as a relationship, and really break the fourth wall in a way that Ferris Bueller would talk to the audience. Now you can actually have a relationship every day with that kind of a character. So it's basically starting at the headwaters of media with image and story, and where we're going to go, I think, is someplace really exciting.
Awesome. I feel like you're really onto something. All I see Jen Alpha do is scroll, whether it's TikTok or Webtoons. So being able to take that to the next level as we move into special stories is going to be really interesting. Plus, if you are bringing in these characters, they're going to really be best friends with my moose character that I've been building. So we'll have to have them introduce each other.
Well, and that's going to be a real big thing too, because just like we're using AIs as tools on top of tools to craft and create, we're going to have characters that come to life and have their own life. Yeah. And how you kind of move into that space is going to be super interesting too.
Yeah.
I wonder if our virtual beings are all going to be friends.
Oh, they are all going to be friends. Exactly. No more FOMO. I can just send out my virtual being.
Go to the party for me.
Go to that fourth party for me, because I hear we all ended up at Denny's, and I totally missed out on that because I stopped at 3. Anyway, let's jump to Rachel before I lose my voice. Let's jump to Rachel. Rachel, you've been talking a little bit about some new design frameworks that you're developing for storytelling that blend generative and procedural models. Do you want to kind of dive into that?
Yeah, so at Fabric, as I mentioned, we're really focused on the tooling side of things. We've talked a lot about kind of generative tooling. One of the things that we think about is how do we make these applications production ready? And especially for larger scale productions, for film and TV, for things like that, obviously to support creators. But generative models in general suffer from sometimes issues of control, right? Being able to generate an image, but then be able to break apart pieces of it and say, I want to tweak this thing and not this thing. And because of how they are created, generative models don't really have the ability to enable that control, right? So we're looking at how do we take what generative is good at, but also bring in other forms of AI. Where is it a procedural form of AI that's more interesting? Where is it not necessarily a generative form of AI, but it's natural language processing to streamline the interface around creation, right? So some of these are some of the workflows we've broken down around areas of production, categories of production, where AI in different forms is introducing efficiencies, is creating new ways of making things. But in general, I think to really see where this space is going in general and how creator tools can evolve, especially the next generation of AI tools, it really comes down to seeing how do we bring all these different hybrid AI methods together to really support the creator.
Awesome. Sorry, I got distracted by the button. But I'm listening. So unpack it a little bit as we're thinking about, you talked about procedural narrative, you talked about NLP, you talked about generative AI. For those who might not know, though, we're in a pretty awesome community. Just unpack a little bit on where you would use each of those.
Yeah, so there are 4 workflows here. Let's maybe pick one around 3D transmedia workflows, and we'll get into some companies in our cohorts later on that are working in this space. But if you want to develop a 3D world that's able to, at some point, support virtual production for you, but also potentially support developing a virtual world, a gaming experience, or some other thing where it spawns from the same thing, there's definitely use cases where these things intersect, but they're also unique needs, right? So say you develop a 3D world and you're great, it's great high fidelity, you're able to put it onto a screen for virtual production, but then you want to use it in your mobile game. You don't want to recreate those assets, but the assets need to be much more lightweight for use in a mobile game. So one of the startups in our cohort, ModTech, Alex Porter, the CEO, is actually right here. They're focused on how do we preserve the fidelity of that asset without having to recreate it from scratch, and understand the needs of the format, right? So that's a form of AI, but it's not a generative AI format. If we look at other things kind of in that 3D transmedia workflow, a lot of these things we're thinking about with virtual agents, there's a mix of generative conversation maybe that the characters enable, that enable the characters to converse in a gaming environment, but we want more control over that, so it might fall under a more top-down architecture of this is what the character is like, these are kind of the rules of how it operates, and a more kind of handheld way of kind of coding what that logic of the character is as it fits within the story architecture. But then within that, tapping into that scale and the generative power of text LLMs, right? So as you go through each of these, there's really a mix of methods at play when we talk about motion capture, environmental retargeting, right? That's taking the motion capture, but being able to match it to the rig, being able to pull that rig into your 3D world maybe and have it respond to the environment. So if your character is moving through an environment that's flat versus moving up an environment that's rocky, the movement needs to look different. There's AI that can enable that, but that's much more on the, machine learning side and kind of these other methods of AI that exist. So I think when we are thinking about the tooling piece, it really comes down to first breaking down the workflow in general and seeing what are these categories of efficiency, what are the different forms of AI that can fit in there, but then also going one level above that and saying, okay, there's efficiencies within these traditional models, but how are the models themselves changing? So I think as we look at some of those things, especially in that 3D formatted space, it's changing the way we think about content production because it's not necessarily this is my film process, and then I go and then I make a game, but it's a separate production process. It's how do I go into it with this integrated mindset of what my IP looks like across these different touch points, and then have that smart production mentality of how I want to have efficiencies across that whole point of production.
Awesome, awesome. So you're totally jumping us right into the whole, I swear I'm hitting this.
Technology.
There we go.
Works.
Tech happens is what I usually say. You can replace that first word with whatever you want. So let's jump into just a conversation here about the creative process and choices that we're making. Ivo and Julian, I know you both were pioneering it and impacting music. We've kind of had a conversation this morning. Everybody's sharing their favorite song. Let's riff a little bit on, how you're leveraging these tools in the music and video production, because I think it's really interesting from a creative industry process is to realize that it's impacting every type of medium. Every medium has some sort of generative AI. And so as a remix artist, I always like to say that pioneering happens in music first, which I think is very similar to what we're seeing with generative AI. So jump in there and tell me a little bit about like the unique advantages or disadvantages that are working in this space.
Well, as a creator, number one, you do have this capacity to create maybe 100 different versions of the same work very quickly. So as a concept development artist, some of what I do, especially in music, is write 15 different versions of the same song. Same lyrics, similar ideas, but try lots of different iterations. Same in videos, same in images. I might do 1,000 images in order to see lots of different potential options, right? And from there, I'm then curating down and then blending and remixing and iterating. So instead of like doing one drawing or a handful of concept drawings, I might deliver to the concept to my client at the end 100 curated objects. Those 100 curated objects started as 2,000 curated objects, right? And I'm sort of filtering it down to deliver the best for them to choose from. Right, so that's how it slightly changes how I produce. Now in music, I'm a lyricist, but I work with other musicians. And so I have a bandmate and we've collaborated on a number of songs and videos together. And in that process, we take the stems and the ideas and we might use a voice from 11 Labs, but then we're bringing it back into our music production tools and doing a traditional workflow in music. So we're using the AI tools to maybe refine maybe the lyric addressing how we're going to talk about this concept, or maybe we're using audio, but for a stem instead of a whole song. Or we might try 11 Labs, for example, to do a simulated voice that then creates some element in the piece, right? So there's always an element where you're still driving your own creative process. And you're looking at the tools and saying, okay, how can this expand my horizons quickly or help me see more so that I can then see the best possible outcomes? Same in world building, because you have skyboxes, 3D objects, sound. All of the things that go into a world can now be generated. That wasn't even easy to do a year ago, but now there are tools that do this in an integrated way, and I'm going to let you talk more about that.
Yeah, so I've been curating electronic music for a very long time. Since the 80s, I've had this kind of obsession to map all of the different genres and subgenres, and I travel to music festivals. And so my kind of love for curation of virtual worlds actually stems from my curation of electronic music. And I've had a music label, and then I work with the Ultra Music Festival, so I've had this kind of like rich understanding of all of those pathways. And now that I see AI emerging, my message to producers is don't ever be absolutist about whether you like it or don't like it. It's not an option. Like, you really need to explore. And not only explore it from the sense of, creating different iterations of music, but also utilizing AI to help with your marketing, with your distribution. There's a new company called Boomi that allows you to create a song and then it helps you put it into Spotify, And that's not the end all be all when it comes to music, but it's leveraging all of the different tools that are yet to come, that are revolutionizing electronic music or any acoustic music as well. And I think that's the key, is to explore. It's never to just settle down in what you're doing and just keep on iterating, because your style could change. And eventually you'll be able to train a model with your style and your songs. And this model will not be connected to the web, but it actually is of your music. And then you could create different iterations and maybe even remixes of different genres. And that excites me a lot. And that's when I release music under my moniker, Many Names. I'm on Spotify and SoundCloud. I'd never release like an album or an EP. I have this strategy where I release one song with multiple remixes, because those remixes are different genres. So that's part of the whole creative process, is being able to kind of augment what you're doing with the technology, but also with strategies to get the music heard, because that's the most important thing. You can make all the music in the world, but if nobody hears it, does it really matter? So that's the main thing, is to leverage the tools, not only for creation, but for distribution and marketing and community building.
Okay, so let's dive into that. We've all created something, and now we're thinking about distribution and monetization. I think you're thinking about monetization as a startup with Snack Shop, and how are you going to use it? Because What I found with playing with all these tools is I had to give each student, 30 students, a $90 scholarship to actually play with all of these AI tools in my class. It's not cheap, right? It's not cheap to actually be able to generate all of that and to add it and everything. Are you including that in your like business models? Like, what does that look like?
So one of the things I get really excited about is this ability to produce at the speed of imagination, right? That we now have the ability to create high fidelity imagery and music that would be impossible without like studio musicians and a lot of costs and a lot of investment and time. And the more you can iterate and the faster you can go, the better you can get to the goal, right? And we see now kids, particularly younger generations, growing up thinking of themselves as digital natives. They are embracing these tools. They're AI natives. They're thinking about how they're a force multiplier. So we've moved now from broadcast, where something's packaged and thrown over the fence and people watch it, to a time when media is going to become malleable, right? And it's like the printing press allowed things to go from monks in like, a little cave drawing illustrated manuscripts to now you can print and you can distribute and you can change and you can update and you can revise. So what happens when media is a conversation with the audience? So the starting point, like a TikTok dance, might be a creator who says, this is my expression. But then you throw it to the audience and they now have the tools to go, oh, you know what? I love this story, but I hate the ending. I like this ending. Now, I as a creator will say, well, that's not my ending. But nice, I kind of like that you wanted to make a different ending. And maybe the audience goes, we actually like that one better. We took Indiana Jones 4 and we think it could be better this way. Because all those digital assets now become part of a mosaic that can be rearranged. And there'll be some creators that will say, no, I don't want my work to be malleable. But I think what we're going to see is the next wave of creators are ones that really embrace the opportunity to not only create, express, but empower the audience to have a conversation with the art. And that's what we want to do with Snack Shop.
Oh, I love it because as a fan scholar, we just used to be textual poachers, right? And people were always on the side. And now I feel like fan fiction and creation is going to become mainstream. And even perhaps we won't get sued for, using some of these properties anymore. We'll see about that.
Well, that'll get worked out though, right? Because there's going to be a chain of creation.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able to say, okay, this element came from this thing. And you already see that now with Disney doing the license in Fortnite, where anybody can make a Fortnite game with Disney assets or Lego assets.
Yeah.
And as we start to work through, okay, well, how do you have asset tagging? Your investment in content in a movie, like why would you just want one expression of those assets? You've invested $200 million in something that people don't go see. Why wouldn't you want to empower the audience to maybe make a better version of that? There's ego issues, get it. But the creators that are kind of, I think, more vulnerable and embrace the flow, how awesome if my work is actually discovered in India because somebody adapts it into culturally relevant material that I could never create, but is derivative of what I expressed.
Okay, so I think we've all drank the Kool-Aid, right? And we're like, oh, okay, this is amazing, we love it, we're all using it and everything. But there's got to be some significant challenges, right? And as artists, which ones when do we choose to use it and when do we not? Because I think about AI and how it's like totally replaced search. I mean, does anyone use traditional search anymore? I mean, I don't. I just have my friend here answer all my questions for me. But so we're distributing our cognition, right? We're kind of freeing it up and we're letting other people, letting the generative AI take purpose and use it. But what does that mean? What's some challenges that you all see?
Trust, whether we can trust that tool to give us correct information, whether the data it's built on is high quality data, whether we have the ability to own that and make it our own IP and publish it. So for example, what Stability did this week with changing their licenses is changing the way some of us address making new models and pulling Stable Diffusion out of our workflow because we can no longer train a model and use it effectively and still make it our own. And that changes depending on which country or which company you're working with. So sometimes you have to go back to your team and say, okay, we were using this tool, we thought it was open source, it's not open source anymore. Or we want to own our workflow and our data and our AI all the way through. So we need to design a system that we can own tip to tail for our IP, right? And these are the conversations that you need to be having in the conference room together now, along with where does the data go? Are we putting our users at risk? All of the things that go along with interactivity and generativity.
Adobe did a great job of getting some attention on that.
Oh, yes, they
about a week
did.
ago.
Yes,
It's like
they did.
Unity did their thing, and Adobe said, "Hold my beer."
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Is everyone familiar with what Adobe did? Maybe share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Adobe was the solution that, for example, many agencies would use because they already had the Adobe Creative Suite in-house and they already had permissions. So when I teach other agencies how to do generative work, they would often go to Adobe Creative Suite first.
Yeah.
Now, that is not the case. And part of that is a question of ownership and licensing and changes to license, and whether that's a viable workflow for people long term. It damages trust every time the TOS changes with the end user because we all expect these tools to be malleable, right? And then when you take them away from us, we get mad.
Well,
So,
and I think the crisis of trust is going to be the next decade.
Yeah.
And it's at every level of society as we start to question, do we have a shared view of reality? Do we have a shared view and understanding of who is operating in our interests with transparency? I mean, OpenAI is now really closed AI, right? I mean, and it didn't start out that way. They shifted. 23andMe said, don't worry, we'll never sell your data. Give me your genetic information. Oh, we went bankrupt. We're going to sell that to China, right? So what happens over time with these relationships we're building that are the most intimate relationships in history? Because your cell phone knows more about you than anyone else in your life, including you. It knows where you go, it knows what you like, it knows who you like, it knows what you buy, it knows where you buy it, it knows when you buy it, it knows when you're awake and when you're moving. It is a data cloud that you walk around with that companies are hoovering up and using, sometimes that you know about, and many times in ways that are unexpected because you have these cascading effects of how the data is operating. There's, for example, at Amazon, precognitive load balancing inventory managers, which I love. I've always wanted a really long title. And what they do is they look at patterns of behavior and they go, oh, here's somebody that buys every Harry Potter book. We know that the next Harry Potter book's coming out, they're gonna buy it. So instead of us shipping it to them, we tell the publisher, you take those costs, ship it next to that person as close as possible, and we know when they hit the buy button, we can get it there in 2 hours, and we've saved cost and made more efficiency. That's a great use case, right? Because that's our data helping us to have accessibility and efficiency and transactional speed. Well, what happens when we have these like virtual intimate characters that we're working with? Because I don't have a human AI, I have a virtual AI. And it knows me and it knows everything on my phone and it's that Siri in my head. And then somebody buys that company and it decides, oh, you know what? We should sell all that data. Or we should try to move Craig and weaponize him because we can use him as an agent to do something against another company that we don't like. We can inform them. It can be an echo chamber and fake news on steroids.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, the thing that we're not even really talking about yet.
Well, one last thing. So going back to Adobe, it's not only the problems with the AI modeling, there's also the subscription terms of use and the cancellation, the shady ways that you can exit the program, right, the software, and that's
adding to stock
yeah,
photos.
so that's like a whole nother thing. And I think artists should know, like baseline, that there will be inherent bias.
Yeah.
So you should just understand that that's relevant to your creative process, and then choose the tools that are best suited for you, and then stay informed. That's the main thing.
Yeah, that goes to, we talked about trust, but like the data, how data in, data out, right? What is this going to be? Even though it's diffusion and everything, I saw it firsthand with my students when I'd be like, hey, I want you to create your own avatar and start developing it. I have a lot of students from China, and every time they posted it in, they'd get a white girl, and they'd be like, this is not me. So they would have to keep on prompting and prompting to the point where they had to add their own images in order to get even similar ones. So the data is lacking, right? And how do we actually, if we're really taking a fandom approach, how do we actually really support new people coming into the audience and adding more and making those models better instead of just scraping or taking all of our data, right?
Yeah. And from an artistic perspective,
thoughtful.
it's better to actually create something and have AI help modify it than just prompt something into existence, right? Because then you start it with kind of like the seed of creativity, and as that final product goes, you have more like agency and ownership of how that art evolves.
Yeah, agency and ownership. Let's talk about that. Rachel, you are one of the founders of Fabric. You've got this living lab on the beach. Y'all, if you haven't gone to it, you totally need to. I felt like I was like the rock star professor when I brought my 30 students there. They were like, you know these people?
Professors make all the money. We talked about this last
Professors make all the money, just so you know.
Billionaire
Let me have
professors
my
everywhere you
heyday
go.
moment when I feel like a rock star. So talk a little bit. You have a lot of different startups and artists working with this. I'm really curious what you've seen from them as you design these workflow processes of like the choices they're making, the agency that they want. When do they use it? When do they don't?
I think that agency piece is really big because I think when you're talking about challenges with AI, it comes back to how is the AI complementing us, right? How is it augmenting what we can do?
Right.
So when we talk about concerns and challenges of AI, one of the things I get concerned about is we over-rely sometimes on generative or like emergent models and don't think about like hybrid models, right? That are taking into account like more top-down control as it merges with these emergent and generative models. So when we look at startups, we're also thinking in that same way of who's using generative, but where are they introducing the control into that system? So one of our startups, for example, Playbook, which actually won the pitch competition at AWE yesterday. So congrats, Playbook. If you want to go see them, I think they're in exhibit hall. Their booth is 616. But there's a video, and I can talk over it a little bit. But one of the things they're doing is they have a spatial design engine that's, I think if we click it again, it might play. That's designed to be multiplayer, collaborative, so people can work together. But they take, when you're working with generative models, you don't have a lot of control. So they let you easily kind of gray box your 3D environment. So you have that degree of control. You're able to put in your camera movements, and then you put the generative kind of model on top of that, but it's pulling in that depth information. It's pulling in other information from the 3D scene. So you're getting something closer to what you want as the final output. So that's one way that we're thinking about that piece of control, right? And then if we go to the next one, another way we're thinking about control is through products like ModTech, which is, okay, I've created this asset, but now I want to make sure I have control of how I pull it into all these other things, right? If we're looking at a lot of the systems for creating 3D assets in general, kind of across the pipeline in a generative way, they don't create that mesh architecture. They don't have the ability to then go in and edit the asset. But ModTech is thinking kind of across that end-to-end workflow of how are we taking in those generated 3D assets and actually making them editable and more high fidelity for your workflows? How are we taking the 3D assets that you actually create from scratch and then bringing them into the other categories of workflows that you're looking at? So I think when it comes to augmenting, a lot of it comes down to how are we merging those different models of AI, and then how are we, on top of that, designing interfaces and UX that really understands what creators are doing, what their actual processes are, and building in a way that kind of really comes alongside how they think and how they would want to create.
Okay, so did you want to add? Anyone? Okay, I want to make sure that I have room for a few questions from the audience. So let's kind of close this up with a last question and think about the emerging trends or advancements of AI. What do you believe will have the most significant impact on the creative industries in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Ooh, you want to start?
Wow. Well,
I mean, since it changes tomorrow.
Yeah, I just want to preface this by saying I don't know how many of you guys get this feeling. You're here, you're in the technical flow, whether you're an AI maxi, and I'm interested if anybody in the room hates AI, because we have a lot of people now that are anti-AI, which great, I want a question. Okay, just generative.
Just generative.
But I used to go for many years to different kinds of tech gatherings and dinner parties, and you would talk about what was going to happen, and people were like, oh, PlayStation, there's going to be PlayStation 2, and this is where the puck's going to be, and this is how we're going to be doing better 3D, and we're going to get these kind of chip processors and Moore's Law. So you could kind of go, okay, this is where we're going. And this is the first time that when I go to like different things, like one of my kind of favorite questions is like, where do you think the puck's going to be in a few years? And it's the first time people are like, well, exponential curves are so different. I would not have thought that we would be seeing the kind of creativity from AI now. I would not be thinking that we would be seeing the kind of acceleration of AI with AI recursively improving itself now. And 5 years at this speed, I think we'll be able to speak into worlds, whatever we want to experience. And it's not necessarily going to be the holodeck just yet, but I think it's going to be very, very close.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why I founded the Virtual Worlds Museum, because of that right there. It's like I want to take inventory of the worlds we've created now, and also the worlds of the past, the sunset worlds that have been discontinued, to learn all of those lessons before we get to this point in time where you can prompt the world into existence, right? Because it's going to proliferate exponentially, and there's going to be millions of worlds. So that's.
So we are moving into Ready Player One.
We are, and I think the next level of AI, and this might sound a little out there, but it's actually when it starts embodying other things besides being stuck inside the machine, right? So now we're talking about drones and robots, and coming out of that and using computer vision and all of the things that will make it kind of be more of a tangible experience for the technology to evolve. So that's what I see coming.
Neuroscientist, are we looking at Neuralinks? Just to play with that neuro part?
I'm not a huge fan of Neuralink, not really a big fan of how they're doing their experiments, among other things.
Fair.
I think when we're thinking about augmenting and kind of coming alongside, I'm hoping that in the next, I guess my hope for the next 5 years is that we really start to think around how differentiate what these types of intelligence are, right? I think there's a lot of talk around like AI and comparing it to human intelligence. If we think about the data sets that are behind AI, right? There's text data sets, there's image and video data sets. That's a small kind of, that's a very diluted way of capturing reality compared to how we as embodied humans capture reality. So if we're training AI on these data sets that don't have the depth of how we capture reality, which we don't even fully understand from a neuroscience perspective, it's not going to be human intelligence, right? It's going to be a different category of intelligence. So I think my hope for the next 5 years is as we start to kind of figure out where these tools are, what AI is doing, how are we thinking about what AI can do really well? And it's not necessarily going to be replicating human intelligence, but it's being complementary, potentially doing things that we can't do at scale around pattern recognition and things like that. And then finding what we're good at and being able to kind of bring those pieces together.
Yeah, because you humans are more powerful than any transformer or model or tool out there. You have an idea machine in your mind right now that you can use to create worlds infinitely. You are not on the rails. You are not modeled on a small set of data. You have more profound ability to put the connections together in your own minds and to make those worlds real. No tool can do that. And no tool can replace what you have in your own minds. And so I want you to embrace your own creative spirits and to say, okay, I know the vision I now want to create. Where can a tool help me be more prolific, or help me see a different angle, or help me master this work so it looks better or sounds better so that it's more complete or more finished? Never do these tools replace great human artistry. They improve us in some ways. We get better the more we experiment. So never, never, never fire a human and put an AI in a role. It doesn't work. I will tell you right away, it's generally a bad idea. It reduces trust, and you're going to sink yourselves long term. But if you build a creative process where people can work effectively with their tools, iterate, get feedback together, and grow together, then you have an artistic future where every world you create in virtual space can be a real space. All of these things we're creating in XR, they're virtual production sets, and they will be intelligent worlds that we're walking into, whether they're in an immersive space or in a headset. That's a reality that you are creating in real time. You are creating a model of reality every time you create something here. So take that agency, own your own data, own your own AI, and make sure that that's something that you feel comfortable and safe putting forward as your own art.
Yeah, I think just to add a slight thing to that, I love the meme about how we used to work in the mines, and we brought people out of the mines with technology, and now the children went back to the mines because they yearn for the mines in Minecraft, right? I mean, we talk a lot about how AI is taking jobs, but I think what we need to think about is, are they taking the jobs that we really love? And if AI can accelerate, augment, and help, which it will, and grow to be this mentor, companion, storyteller, connector, it can build a bridge to us being better and doing the things that we really want to focus on that matter, not necessarily having to do all the things like a typing pool in the 50s, because we were able to make communication faster and more efficient. We didn't need to put money into a bunch of repetitive process that really isn't very fun. So my hope for the future is that AI is a gateway where we can actually have more fun. And statistically, the more we've had technology on a global scale, it's gotten better, and we have a huge leisure class that didn't exist. So hopefully it's a more fun world to come.
Yeah, and an extension of the Minecraft statement, the kids that were playing Minecraft and Roblox and Rec Room, they're the future of tomorrow.
Yeah.
And they're not going to want to use Zoom. They're going to want to be in virtual worlds.
And they're now in the business in the workplace.
Exactly.
They're in their 20s.
They're the ones that are creating the future of enterprise and technology and education.
And
that's how I
gaming
feel.
Wall Street with game.
Yeah. So I'll just add, because sometimes, we all go to these conferences, we surround ourselves with people of likeness, similar to us. And I'll give you just a little story of my first AI class. How many of you would think that the minute I have week 1 in my generative AI class that everyone would have tried it, right? Raise your hand if you think they have tried it, right? Of the 30 students, only 4 had ever tried it before. So I had to really step back and begin at the beginning of how do you do a prompt and what is generative AI? So, don't forget that we do surround ourselves by people of similarities and live a little bit in our bubbles, and that it's a very big world that we might be having a participation gap. And so with this hockey stick growth, there really might be an opportunity of education. The other thing I'll add is from creative agencies. A lot of creative agencies reach out to me and they're like, how is our world changing? How is our process changing? Where do we start leveraging and integrating these AI tools? And what I've found is you still need to understand the creative process. You need to learn how to ideate and critically think on your own before you start integrating these tools. Because if not, you're going to be the one that puts the pictures out there to your client that has 7 fingers on one hand. And we're all going to look like, y'all are going to look dumb. We don't want you to look dumb, So really critically think about the words that you're sharing, the images that you're sharing, and how you're kind of reflecting yourself. Don't leave yourself out of the picture, for sure. It goes back, and I'll just give you a little history. It goes back to thinking about how many of you use spell check, right? Do you even think about spelling these days? Grammarly, right? Do you think about grammar? This is these tools. It's a new tool to distribute your cognition. But I never just trust Grammarly, right? I question, did they use that there correctly? Is it there? Right? And that's the same thing with these generative AI tools. They make mistakes, and so you need to put yourself at the center. So we have 2 minutes, so I'd love to be able to get 1 or 2 questions. Erin, can we get the next slide?
Next slide.
Next slide.
Great panel. Thank you very much. Really something else. sticking with the whole agency sort of conversation, and you guys are talking about it a lot, that it's odd to feel like there is an adoption problem. At the same time, we're feeling exponential growth. And I look at the way that the trust has been with your CAAs, your agencies, where I work. And I just wanted to know from you whether or not that agency model will be able to evolve and keep up with the sort of the evolution of these tools, and you're getting these phone calls, or are we going to find growth around them? What are your thoughts about that?
Do you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, we have talked about this before, James, around the agency model. I think the challenge is, as we think about the role of the creative in general, it's no longer, the agency model is built around RFPs, is built around, if we're talking about like ad agency, creative agency is, and it's no longer, creative doesn't exist in a vacuum. You have to think, like Craig was saying, about the distribution piece. Who is actually going to be consuming this content? Who are you trying to reach? What format is the final thing in? And that's part of the creative process. The strategy and the creative are kind of married to each other. So I think in this day and age, that's how agencies in general are needing to adapt. It's historically been two separate departments, but bringing those things together.
Yeah. At RealityCraft, I designed an inquiry-based approach so that I can guide them through the questions they need to be asking in the room themselves. Because at the end of the day, every use case and every team's different. They're going to need to use different tools, but depending on what the end agreement is going to need to be. So knowing how to ask the right questions at the right time.
Yeah, and also for creators to join organizations that are helping lead ethics, like the XR Guild, xrguild.org, and you can learn and have mentorship and actually utilize best practices for your business and art.
And if any agencies want to join, we're conducting research starting this fall on an A/B testing where we're doing the traditional creative process of agency and then integrating another group, utilizing and integrating AI tools so we can assess where and when and how these tools will be part of the process.
So you're giving agency to agencies?
I teach agency, yes.
Exactly.
So much agency. So thank you so much, guys, for attending. Please, let's hear it for our panel one more time. Fantastic job. We are now in this room here. We're now officially on break until 2 o'clock. We'll come back for our next session at 2. But please stop up and talk with the panel in case I wasn't able to get to your question. That way you have an opportunity. Grab some lunch, and we'll see you back at 2.